These are just Wall Street guys who started this thing.
Karate combat?
Karate combat.
Madison Square Garden. Two of the most dominant forces in karate are about to clash in a fight that would send shockwaves through the martial arts world. Joe Lewis, undefeated and unstoppable. Chuck Norris, precise, calculated, and ready to prove the world wrong. What happens next? A savage fight that no one saw coming, and it changes karate forever. In the 1960s, karate was no longer just a mysterious Eastern discipline, it was exploding across America. What was once a niche martial art, practiced mostly by military personnel and a few die-hard enthusiasts, was now becoming a mainstream phenomenon. The U.S. military's exposure to the art during the Korean and Vietnam Wars helped spread its influence, but it was Hollywood's obsession with Asian culture and martial arts that truly ignited the fire. Movies like Enter the Dragon and the rising interest in Eastern philosophy pulled Americans in. But it wasn't just about philosophy, it was about fighting. And when it came to fighting, two names stood out above all others: Joe Lewis and Chuck Norris. Joe Lewis was already a name to reckon with, a powerhouse, a Marine, and an undefeated champion who had taken the karate world by storm. At 6 feet tall, 195 pounds of muscle, Lewis embodied the raw power that karate had never seen before. His aggressive blitzing style left opponents reeling, and his swagger outside the dojo matched his domination inside it. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris was quietly climbing the ranks. Known for his calm demeanor and disciplined approach, Norris wasn't about raw power. He was about precision. His focus was on timing, strategy, and adaptability, and he was quickly becoming a serious contender for the top spot. The stage was set. The collision of these two martial arts philosophies was inevitable. The showdown would come at Madison Square Garden, the most prestigious venue in the country, where karate would forever change. Joe Lewis wasn't just a fighter. He was a force of nature. A former Marine who had learned karate during his military service in Okinawa, Lewis was an explosive athlete whose power and aggression were unmatched. He was the first true American karate star, a man who redefined what it meant to be a champion.
Lewis didn't just fight, he overwhelmed. His blitzing tactics and explosive strikes were designed to break opponents mentally and physically. His aggressive style, charging forward, closing the distance quickly, and hitting harder than anyone else, struck fear into every opponent he faced. At the time, karate tournaments in America were still evolving. Full contact wasn't yet the norm, and many fighters stuck to traditional, formal techniques. But Joe Lewis had different plans. He wasn't interested in tradition for tradition's sake. He wanted to win, and he wanted to dominate. He quickly gained recognition for his raw power and his ability to close the distance with lightning speed. By 1967, Lewis was the favorite to win the All-American Karate Championship at Madison Square Garden. He had become the face of American karate, a living legend who had yet to be defeated. His rise to the top felt unstoppable. But no one realized it at the time, but this fight, this one match, would challenge everything he believed about karate, and it would set the stage for a massive shift in the sport. Chuck Norris wasn't a household name in 1967, but he was about to change that forever. While Joe Lewis was busy making headlines, Norris was quietly building a reputation as a methodical, disciplined, and highly skilled martial artist. Where Lewis relied on raw power, Norris relied on technique, timing, and relentless preparation. Norris began his martial arts journey during his time in the U.S. Air Force stationed in South Korea. There he discovered Tong Soo Do, a Korean martial art that emphasized strong strikes and disciplined movement. From there, he expanded his training, studying Taekwondo and Shido-ryu, learning to perfect his technique. Unlike Lewis, Norris wasn't flashy. He didn't make bold predictions or boast about his ability. He let his actions do the talking. By the mid-1960s, Norris had already earned a reputation as a fierce competitor, defeating some of the best names in the circuit. He was a fighter who studied every move of his opponents, looking for openings, learning their habits, and then using his impeccable timing to exploit those weaknesses. As Norris continued to climb through the tournament ranks, it was clear that he wasn't just another fighter, he was a technician. His precise, measured approach was something new in the world of karate, and that's what made him such a dangerous threat to a fighter like Joe Lewis.
The 1967 All-American Karate Championship was shaping up to be the biggest event of the year. The Madison Square Garden arena, normally reserved for boxing and basketball, would now host a tournament that promised to bring karate to the American mainstream like never before. But more than just the tournament itself, everyone knew there was one fight that would steal the show: Chuck Norris versus Joe Lewis. In one corner, you had Lewis, the undefeated champion known for his aggressive, powerful style. In the other, Norris, a technician who had studied every one of Lewis's matches, preparing for this very moment. The media had already built the fight up to be a battle of two opposing philosophies: raw power versus strategic precision. The tournament was a single elimination format, and Lewis, as expected, breezed through his early rounds with his trademark aggression. But Norris, quietly moving through the bracket, had a plan. He knew that to defeat Lewis, he would have to exploit his weaknesses, something that few had managed to do before. He wasn't going to overpower him, he was going to outsmart him. The moment the bell rang, the atmosphere at Madison Square Garden shifted. The crowd fell silent, the electric hum of anticipation palpable in the air. Joe Lewis, the undefeated powerhouse, charged forward with his signature aggressive style, intent on overwhelming Chuck Norris with his raw power. The tension was thick. Everyone was waiting to see if Norris could withstand the storm. Lewis moved like a freight train, attacking relentlessly with his brutal blitzes. His strikes were fast, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. He knew that if he could just land a few solid hits, it would be over. The crowd cheered as Lewis advanced, a true force of nature in motion. But Norris didn't retreat. He didn't falter. With remarkable poise, Norris sidestepped Lewis's wild attacks, slipping in and out of range like a shadow. He didn't block, he intercepted. Timing was his weapon, and he used it with surgical precision. Every time Lewis attempted to close the distance, Norris countered with a clean, well-timed ridge hand that landed perfectly on Lewis's jaw. First point to Norris. The crowd gasped. This wasn't the one-sided, power-driven fight they expected. Norris wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. As the round continued, it became clear that this wasn't going to be the easy victory for Lewis everyone had anticipated. Lewis, frustrated, started pushing harder. His attacks became wilder, less controlled, but in doing so, he left himself open. Norris knew this, and he was ready. The fight escalated as both men exchanged devastating blows, each round testing their limits. Lewis, frustrated by Norris's evasiveness, began to fight harder, throwing everything he had in his arsenal. His attacks were powerful, fast, and relentless. But Norris remained calm, his focus unwavering. Every time Lewis came at him with raw aggression, Norris responded with a sharp counter, exploiting the gaps in his opponent's defense.
It was clear now, this was no longer just a contest of strength. It was a battle of willpower and strategy. Norris, though smaller and less physically imposing, used his superior footwork and timing to neutralize Lewis's brute force. His movements were calculated, his strikes precise, landing just before Lewis could fully complete his combinations. Norris didn't just react, he dictated the rhythm of the fight. With each clean hit, he wore Lewis down. Lewis's powerful body shots landed, but they didn't seem to faze Norris as much as expected. Norris took the hits, absorbing the punishment with a focus that only added to his control of the match. As the match went on, the intensity of the fight grew, but so did the psychological warfare. Norris was slowly but surely chipping away at Lewis's dominance, and the cracks in the undefeated champion's aura were beginning to show. With each strike, Norris wasn't just winning points, he was rewriting the playbook on how to fight. As the final round approached, both fighters were visibly exhausted. Their bodies bore the marks of a brutal clash, yet neither man showed any signs of relenting. Joe Lewis, who had dominated for so long, was now beginning to doubt himself. The strategy he relied on, raw power and aggression, was no longer enough to break through Norris's disciplined defenses. The crowd, once certain of Lewis's victory, was now on edge, unsure of how this fight would end. Norris, on the other hand, was still calculating. Every movement, every feint, was part of a bigger plan. He knew exactly how Lewis fought, and he knew exactly what he needed to do to win. As the seconds ticked down, Norris made his move. Lewis lunged forward with one of his signature, powerful strikes, but this time, Norris was ready. Norris pivoted inside, evading the hit, and in a flash, delivered a lightning-fast punch that landed clean on Lewis's chin. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena. The crowd gasped. Norris wasn't done. Without hesitation, he followed up with a controlled hook kick, a move rarely seen in tournament settings, but executed with precision and timing. For the first time in the fight, it was clear. Norris had gained the upper hand. Lewis, stunned and off balance, struggled to recover, but Norris had already seized the momentum. The bell rang, signaling the last moments of what had become an unforgettable battle. Joe Lewis, who had dominated for so long, was now beginning to back himself into a corner. He had fought with everything he had, his raw power, his speed, his aggression, but it wasn't enough. Norris had systematically broken down his defenses, outsmarting him at every turn. Lewis, determined to finish strong, launched one last desperate attack. His movements were wild, fueled by frustration and the desire to reclaim his dominance. But this was exactly what Norris had been waiting for. With a calm, collected expression, Norris dodged Lewis's wild lunges, his movements smooth and calculated. Then it happened. As Lewis lunged forward one final time, Norris saw the opening. With impeccable timing, he sidestepped, pivoted, and delivered a clean, swift strike to Lewis's side. The force of the blow was enough to send Lewis staggering backward, his body momentarily thrown off balance. Norris wasn't finished yet. He followed up with another perfectly executed hook kick, this time landing just inches from Lewis's face, scoring a clean point without ever losing control. The judges hesitated for a moment, but the decision was clear. Norris had won. The crowd erupted in disbelief. The undefeated champion Joe Lewis had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and ultimately outclassed. Chuck Norris had done the impossible. The arena was electric, but the noise felt distant. Chuck Norris stood tall, victorious, as Joe Lewis, despite his fierce spirit, looked at him with a mix of respect and disbelief. The fight wasn't just about a single match. It was about a moment that would forever alter the course of karate in America. For Norris, the win wasn't just an upset. It was a statement. He had proven that precision, timing, and strategy could defeat brute force and aggression. The world now knew that there was a new force in karate, one that didn't rely solely on power, but instead on adaptability, smart footwork, and the ability to read and respond to an opponent's moves. Norris had cracked the code, and the world was watching. As for Joe Lewis, the defeat was a humbling experience. He wasn't done, not by a long shot, but he would have to evolve, to adapt. He would eventually go on to become a founding father of American kickboxing, further pushing the boundaries of competitive martial arts. The shockwave from that fight resonated throughout the karate community. Fighters began reevaluating their approach, and martial arts schools across the country adjusted their training to incorporate the principles Norris had demonstrated. The emphasis shifted. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about strategy, timing, and control. That one match, Chuck Norris versus Joe Lewis, changed karate forever. It was a turning point, marking the shift from traditional techniques to modern dynamic fighting styles that continue to influence martial arts today.